Hi guys. So I thought I would finally finish that presentation that we were doing in class a long time ago. And I thought that I would go through everything that we've already been through just quickly. But the joy of having a recording is you can go back and watch it as many times as you want. I've never done this before, so bear with me. We'll see how it goes. So this was started last winter, talking about animal adaptations to cold and why cold is actually a really good thing in a lot of parts of the world. And it's now summer, but this is still all very relevant. So let's see if I can make this work. So there's animals that are sometimes in the cold, like what we have here in the temperate regions where there's seasons. So in summertime, it's not cold. Well, it is at the moment here in the Pacific Northwest, but it can get very hot, and it's supposed to get very hot in the next few days. So it's only really cold in the winter for a few months of the year here. So there's animals that have to adapt to that. Here's a mountain lion or cougar in the summertime, dry, hot. In the wintertime, snow, cold, very different environments to adjust to. Then there's animals that live in the polar regions, up in the Arctic and in the Antarctic, and they are always in the cold, or historically, they've always been in the cold. So they have different adaptations. I'm going to move me a little bit. There we go. I don't want to cut off the pretty pictures. All right. And you all know that polar bears are in the North Pole and penguins are in the South Pole, and never the two shall meet. So when you see ads with both of them together, as a biologist, that kind of bothers me. Anyway, so what do you do when it's cold? Whether it's sometimes, we're talking about sometimes cold here. We're talking about seasonal cold. What do you do? What strategies can you use to deal with it? Well, one strategy would be, I'm sitting this one out. Wake me up when it's spring. So there's animals that hibernate, right? They fatten up in the fall, and there's lots of food to be had. They put on as much weight. They store food, like chipmunks and squirrels who dig holes and stash nuts and high energy food sources, and then they go to sleep in a nice, warm, cozy, protected lair of some kind. And they just sleep through the cold months. Or another strategy could be saying, I'm out of here. Let's below this popsicle stand. And so they migrate. Some animals migrate long, long ways. A lot of the migrating animals are flying animals, like butterflies. Birds of all sorts, including tiny little hummingbirds, can go a long distance. Some animals are famous for long migrations that have fins, like baleen whales, or most baleen whales, who have summer feeding areas in high latitudes and calving areas in warmer waters at low latitudes, closer to the equator. Here's just a map to show what incredible distances some bird species go every single year. They literally go from one side of the planet to another every year. It's incredible. So another strategy could be, when it's sometimes cold, is to say, all right, well, let's prepare for it. Here's an Arctic fox pup, very cute, and an Arctic hare, and they've got their summer clothes on there. In the spring and the fall, they're in transition zone. They're changing their wardrobe up. And in the winter, they've got their winter clothes on. So they grow very dense, longer, thicker fur coats that are also a different color. So their summer clothes blend in with a summer landscape, and their winter clothes help them camouflage in a winter landscape. Polar bears are always in the cold, and they have adaptations too. They've got actually translucent, hollow, clear hairs, and that helps funnel the sunlight down to their black skin. And black skin helps absorb the warmth, the radiation of the sun. And that's a strategy to help keep them warm, maximize what little sun there is in the Arctic sometimes. And they also have a blubber layer, which is just a very dense layer of fat, which all marine mammals have, except sea otters, to help keep them warm in water. So there you can see the black skin of the polar bear. Polar bears also have very big paws, which are like built-in snowshoes to help them go across ice without slipping and without breaking through thin ice, because it helps distribute their weight. So animals that live in the always cold rely heavily on ice. They need ice for pupping, for having babies, for keeping babies safe from predators and extreme weather conditions. There's some seals and polar bears who also need to protect their babies, and they need the ice as a hunting platform. Penguins, on the other side of the world, have some special adaptations too. So they also have blubber, and they have 4 layers of feathers to help keep them warm. They have a special brood pouch. This penguin over here has an egg in the brood pouch that he's keeping warm. That would be the father penguin. And this father's penguin's chick already hatched. And it's standing on its dad's feet to keep its little feet off of the snow. Meanwhile, mom is out catching fish and is going to bring it back to this little kid. So penguins have 1 large chick. The larger you are, easier it is to stay warm. So that's one strategy too to help the survival of their babies. And put a lot of energy into that 1 chick because, well, life is harsh. Another strategy that penguins have is to huddle together to share body warmth. And in these huddles, they will rotate who's in the middle and who's on the outside. Of course, the birds in the middle are the warmest because they're getting blocked by the wind and the cold and sharing the most body heat. So by rotating, everybody gets a turn. So there's a lot of reasons why ice is a good thing. Sorry, the video is cutting off some words, but I think you'll figure it out. So ice is really important to be able to haul out, to get out of water, to get warmer. It's, like I said, really important for babies, for nursing. They get colder faster, so they need to spend more time out of the water, sleeping, and hunting. Ice is also really important to help primary production in the ocean at these high latitudes. So it provides a structure for plant growth, algae growth. So you see this kind of looks dirty. We're looking underwater. This is an underwater shot. So the ice is above you on the surface of the water. And what looks like this dirty area is actually algae. It's plants. And of course, plants get eaten by animals. Animals get eaten by other animals and on up the food chain. So without that structure, you don't get as much plant growth, and that affects the whole ecosystem. So ice is good also because it reflects sun rays. It reflects the heat of the sun. The sun rays bounce right off the ice, and if there isn't any ice, the water absorbs that heat, and the water gets much, much warmer, and it's not as able to absorb carbon dioxide. Warmer water has less oxygen, a little bit more on that. If you remember an experiment we did where we had a bowl of water and had ice on top of one bowl and didn't have ice on top of another bowl. It was just the water, and we had our heat source, and we measured the water kind of before and after that heat source. That sunshine was on it for a while. There was a really, really big difference between the temperature of the water that had the ice over it and the temperature of the water without the ice covering, even though the water temperatures started out the same. So again, ice provides shelter for denning animals, for babies. And when you're a little baby and your den melts because it got rained on, or because it just melted, because it got too warm too quickly before you were big enough to survive, then there's a lot of mortality. There's a lot of infant mortality now from dens collapsing. If you're a polar bear baby, then you're exposed to the elements. If you're say a ringtail pup, you're not only exposed to the elements, but you're also now exposed to predators. So another reason that ice is good is that it buffers big waves and big storm surges, which we're getting more and more with climate change. So imagine, we also did this experiment where we had ice over water, and we kind of shook the water around to make waves, and we noticed that the water bowl that had the ice over the top hardly moved at all. It kind of, went up and down a little bit, but the water that didn't have ice on it, kind of holding the water down, just sloshed everywhere and created these big waves, which can be a problem. So another problem is that when ice starts to melt, that melted ice makes the ice melt faster, and that makes it melt faster and faster and faster and faster. So when you've got water on top of like an ice shelf, like a glacier, and then you've got water underneath it, it's melting from both sides. So it's really melting fast. Over here, we just have a picture of the mean ice extent in springtime, I believe, over the North Pole from 79 and 2007. So just a couple of decades, really. That is a loss of ice and a lot more exposed ocean, right? So all that ocean is just now going to receive those rays of the sunshine. So when ice melts, it makes water levels go up. And when water levels go up, flooding happens, coastlines change. Here is some projected maps of what the southeast of the US would look like if the oceans rose 1 meter, 2 meters, 4 meters, and 6 meters. And if it raises 6 meters, you can say goodbye to most of Florida and a good chunk of Louisiana as well. So if you want to visit those states, I suggest doing that so soon. And when things flood, it leaves not just animals high and dry, but it leaves people high and dry as well. And I'm sure you can think about a lot of challenges that this situation provides. So our world is getting warmer, and too much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the ocean and the atmosphere are causing higher temperatures all around the planet and more extreme weather patterns. So I'm sure you've heard of the greenhouse effect, and we've talked about it. And we also did a bit of an experiment with this as well, which basically, it's an easy experiment to do if you want. You can just put like a piece of saran wrap over a bowl of water, and then have another bowl that doesn't have saran wrap on it, and then you put like a lamp over the top. That could be your sunshine source. And you measure the temperature after, say, a half an hour of each of the air temperature inside each bowl and the water temperature. And you can just stick a thermometer right through that plastic wrap and to measure the air temperature and then the water temperature. And you'll be surprised at how much heat is getting trapped by that thin plastic wrap. And that is the same thing as our greenhouse gases, which are creating this blanket around the earth, trapping heat inside. So this is just a chart showing carbon dioxide levels from ice core data, and then on top of a volcano in Hawaii. And it's showing, you know, that goes up and down over centuries, thousands of years. These are thousands of years, so 400,000 years ago. And then, whoa, it just skyrockets in recent years. Nothing that we've ever recorded before or seen in historical archives. So we can plot mean global temperature and carbon dioxide together, and we see that as carbon dioxide goes up, so is the global temperature. Here's another way to look at it. In the US, the red areas mean hot, average temperatures in the springtime, and purple areas are the coolest. And you can see the difference between the 1950s and what's projected to be over 100 years from then. And there's quite a significant difference. I mean, you can imagine that all these mountain areas that should have snow in the spring are no longer going to have snow, and that snow reserves, especially up in the mountains, are really, really, really important for water resources and aquatic life. Again, so that was air temperatures. This is sea surface temperature. And you're seeing a change in sea surface temperature. So the darker the red, the bigger the change. So there's one little area off Greenland that's actually getting cooler on average, but that's it. The rest of the world is getting warmer and much warmer. So there's all this carbon dioxide out there. Where's it coming from? How's it getting out there in the atmosphere? Well, it's getting there from the combustion of fossil fuels through driving, our cars and other transportation, factories, forest fires. I think everybody has noticed an increase in forest fires all around the world, and the severity of forest fires. Airplanes, trains, industrial agriculture, industrial pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers are actually made with fossil fuel compounds. So that adds to carbon dioxide output as well. Here's an oil rig offshore pumping out those fossil fuels that are buried deep under the ocean, and then when they get burned, they get released into the atmosphere. So one of the problems with this increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is that it gets absorbed by the ocean, but in doing so, the more carbon dioxide that's in the ocean water, the more acidic it gets. And acid is not a good thing when you are an animal that needs a shell, that has bones, that has any hard parts at all, because it will dissolve those structures. So here we go, there's warm water corals. It's not good. And we were going to do an experiment, and you can do this at home, where you need some vinegar, which is acid, and then you can make a base solution, which is like with baking soda, and then you can just have neutral tap water, and you can put little fragments of like a shell in each of those and see what happens. See if there's any changes between the neutral, the base, and the acidic water. So some people might say, oh, warming world sounds good to me. More margarita time. But it's really not so good for a lot of reasons. This shows a glacier in Argentina. This top picture was taken in 1928 and the bottom in 2004. And you can see a pretty big difference, can't you? So as the ice melts and then evaporates, there's no more water cycling through. Heated water has less oxygen, and there's eutrophication that happens, which means more algae growth, more plant growth in areas that didn't have it before. This is our water reserve, and it's literally disappearing. So sea levels are rising because ice is melting, and also because the water is getting warmer, because warmer water takes up literally more space than cold water does. Cold water is condensed, warm water expands, and you can get pretty stranded if you're trapped. So where are you going to go if the sea level is rising? So sometimes you can just move around, but what if you're an animal or a person that's already kind of at the extreme? You're already living on top of the mountain. You can't go up any higher. What if you're already living as far north or as far south as you can go? You're at the polar regions. There isn't anywhere colder to go. What do you do then? You kind of hit a dead end. What if you're on an island and you can't fly away from the island or swim away from the island? You know, you're an animal that's just stuck with your habitat shrinking. Or what if you try to move and there's barriers, there's walls and roads and cities and rivers and other development, and you can't move, you're kind of stuck. We've been talking about animals that are used to the cold, but what about animals that are used to the warm? What about them? Are they going to fare so badly? Well, unfortunately, in a lot of ways they are. One example is coral bleaching. So the more acidic and warmer the oceans get, the more bleaching that happens. And so many animals rely on coral reefs to provide these habitats, to provide this habitat structure for other animals, that when they die, everything that relies on them dies as well. Here's an interesting thing with temperature as well. A lot of reptiles are sex dependent depending on temperature. So temperature determines the sex of incubating eggs. So at a certain temperature, like say in cooler temperatures, the eggs will be male, and warmer temperatures, the eggs will develop as females. Well, if there's a nice variation where there's cooler places, some places, and warmer places, other places, then you have a nice balance. There's some females and some males. But as temperatures across the globe increase, we're seeing more and more cases where certain species are having more and more of just one sex. And you can imagine that if you're a sexually reproductive animal, that if there's only boys or only girls, that's going to be a problem. So crocodiles are an example, turtles, snakes. This is a problem for a lot of animals. There's some other problems of moving to new places as well. There might be predators or diseases in those new places that you're not adapted to, and so you don't survive very well. Or you might be a predator or a disease moving to a new area and causing problems for the animals that are already there. Bacteria and parasites, they do better in warmer water. So they proliferate and cause a lot of problems, more problems. And again, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but warmer water has less oxygen. And so literally animals will suffocate. So there are already places on the planet that are dry, but they're getting drier. They're experiencing these massive dust storms and droughts, and without water, really nothing survives. Even animals and plants that are adapted to these very dry areas, they do need water to some extent at some point. And there's wet places that are getting wetter. So we're seeing much more extremes. And of course, in those areas, plants, animals, people are getting drowned, swept away, washed away. Habitats are getting shrunk. And so competition for resources is getting stiffer. This is a very, very skinny polar bear. This is showing that as temperatures increase, the ice is melting, the sea ice is melting much sooner than it used to. And polar bears can only hunt during the winter time when there's sea ice, because that's the platform that they hunt on. They can't just swim for days and days. They'll just be exhausted. They need to be able to haul out. They need to be able to catch seals when they're hauled out on ice. They can't. Seals are much better divers and faster swimmers than polar bears are. So polar bears can't catch seals in the water. They need to catch them on ice. And if you're a mother polar bear and you have cubs, then you're in the den with the cubs all winter. So you need that ice to stay around long enough in the spring to eat something, because you've been starving for the last 5 months in the den, nourishing your pups. And when you're nourishing your pups, your cubs, when you're lactating, that's taking a lot of energy away from your reserves. So you have to be able to eat. And if the ice is gone, then you starve, and so do your cubs. Well, on that depressing note, what are we going to do about it? Because we all can do things to help. I've got some ideas, and I'm sure you have ideas as well. So let me share just some of my ideas with you, and then I want you to share some of your ideas with me. So driving less is an obvious one. Ride your bike. Take public transportation. Walk. Do what you can to not be in a car and lessen your car driving. Plant your own food in your backyard, in your neighborhood, in a community garden. The less distance food has to travel, the better. So if you can't plant your own food, or at least some of it, try to make an effort to buy food that's been grown as close as possible to where you live, because that means that it doesn't have to be transported by ship or plane or truck long distances. And the longer the distance, the more carbon dioxide that's released into the atmosphere. Plastic bags, single-use plastic like straws and plastic utensils and plastic bottles, just avoid. Some cities have passed laws banning plastic bags, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, a lot of cities have not. So it is so easy to bring your own bag, right? So do that. Bring your own bag to the store, because these plastics are not recyclable. It's not cost effective to recycle them. So most of them just end up in the ocean, in the waterways, getting consumed by animals, not breaking down in the environment, causing lots and lots of problems. A lot of animals die because of ingested plastic, or because they've suffocated from plastic bags as well. So bring your own bag. Like this. So easy. This is for your parents. Encourage them. Single-use cups, again. You can reuse a cup, right? I mean, there might be times where you just don't have one on hand, but just do your best to bring a mug with you when you're going to a coffee shop or anywhere where you might be consuming a beverage, a picnic, anywhere. And that counts for hot and cold beverages. Plastic water bottles, a big deal all over the world. Again, some countries are starting to ban these, and hopefully we'll see that more and more. But hey, water tastes better out of a mug than it does plastic anyway, and it's better for you because plastic has some nasty chemicals that you don't want to be ingesting. And it's not just the disposal and lack of recycling of a lot of this plastic, but it's the manufacturing. A lot of chemicals, a lot of fossil fuels go into the manufacturing, the making of these plastics. And then of course they have to get distributed. So they have to get trucked all over the place, and that burns a lot of fuel. There's an endangered monk seal chewing on a plastic bottle. So use reusable. I know you guys can do that. This probably won't be applicable to you in the near future, but keep this in mind. Using cloth nappies or diapers instead of disposable makes a huge, huge difference in the amount of plastic that gets used again. You can throw them in the wash and reuse them again and again and again for multiple kids. It's a huge cost saver as well. Plant trees, plant plants. You know, plants absorb carbon dioxide, they release oxygen, they stabilize the soil and help prevent erosion, they provide habitat, they provide shade. There are so many good things about plants. Even if you have an apartment and you just have a tiny balcony space, you can still have some pots, some plants in them. You know, do what you can do, or plant them in a park. You know, there's lots of organizations that plant trees. You know, volunteer one day a month or just one day to help plant some trees. That's a great thing to do. Water conservation. Fresh water is precious. So collect that rainwater for watering your plants. Turn off the taps. Don't have leaky taps. Find creative ways to reuse water. One thing that I do is that if I take a bath, I don't just let the bath water run down. A little bit of soap is okay, but you wouldn't want salt in your bath. But a little bit of soap is all right. I scoop it out with a water pitcher and I water my inside plants as well as outside plants. But I use it to water plants. I reuse that water. I don't just let it go down the drain. And there's lots of ways you can do something similar. Turn off lights, electricity. A lot of the electricity that is produced in the world is from things like coal power plants, things that are really, really highly polluting. So anytime you can use renewable energy on your house, or help pay the utility company to encourage its development, like solar and wind, you know, that's going to make a big difference if everybody in the world did this. Again, with energy, in the summertime, maybe don't cool your house with the air conditioning quite so much. Just hang out in a kiddie pool like this puppy. And in the wintertime, maybe don't keep your house quite so warm. Just bundle up, put on another layer of clothes. Just a 1 to 2 degree difference, warmer in the summer in your house and cooler in the winter in your house can make a huge difference in how much energy you're consuming to heat and cool your house. And again, it's going to save a lot of money. So what other ways could we all do a good job in helping to keep carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and help our planet? Let's see, I've got two more things here. We're talking about plastic, you know, Ziploc bags. A lot of people just throw those away. If you use Ziploc bags, you know, you can wash them out and reuse them again and again. Or you can use containers. I prefer using containers over Ziploc bags because they're so easy to wash. They're a lot easier to wash than Ziploc bags. You just put them in the dishwasher. Things like beeswax wraps instead of plastic. You can seal a container or wrap it around, you know, a half an onion or cheese or whatever you've got. Totally compostable. It's made with cotton and beeswax. It smells good. Totally, totally awesome. How about hanging up your clothes to dry instead of putting them in the dryer? You can do that all year round. You can do it outside, you can do it inside. Yeah, so what are your ideas? I want to know what you can do, what you have done, and maybe what you're planning on doing. And thank you for listening. And I'm going to end the recording now. You guys have been great. I'm so sorry I couldn't come back into the classroom again this year with this pandemic. Hopefully I will see lots of you next year. Ciao.